We good, Q? Planet Earth, what it be like? You got your guy, Hernani Santos, aka the Game Orchestrator, bringing you another Systems Disruptor podcast episode, Crucial Conversations for Radical Educators. Glad you tapped in. Of course, as always, I got my team with me, Dr. Kiana O'Leary and Dr. IJ, or Ananuju, whatever you will. You know what I mean? We got a special guest tonight. We're very excited to jump into, our rapid fire discussion. But before I do that, I do want to read her bio because it's phenomenal. Okay. Dr. Allegra Johnson serves as Executive Director of Educational Services for Da Vinci Schools. Her past experiences include being a self-contained middle school teacher, a high school resource specialist, and a director of special education. As a systems leader, she is on a journey to understand what creating a system-wide community of access and belonging looks and feels like. Allegra earned her master's degree in special education at Loyola Marymount University and her doctorate at LMU in educational leadership for social justice. Outside of work, Allegra loves running, gardening, and cooking. Allegra loves spending time with her husband, who also works in education, their two children, and their doggy Bowser, right? Big shout out to Bowser.
He might make a guest appearance.
All good. And I do want to also highlight that Dr. Johnson is also the Spotlight Award recipient at this year's Ingenuity Conference, live and direct, coming from H-Town, Houston, Texas, which will be held at the University of Houston. Key, hit us with that date one time.
March 22nd through March 23rd, 2024. We're excited. Get your tickets now. It's going to be fire.
Hey, tap in, don't tap out. You know what I mean? If you didn't come last year, you definitely missed out. And this year is promising to bring more of the same, if not more. You feel me? All right. So if you've been tapping into our Systems Disruptor podcast, you know that this season have a totally different format. We're going to engage in a rapid fire discussion with topics. As always, Dr. Kiana is going to be the timekeeper, because if you let me and IJ do it, we'll be talking all night on one topic and we won't get through with the rest of the agenda.
5 minutes each, guys. 5 minutes each.
Hey, they just call us mouthpiece. That's what they call us. All right. With that being said, y'all ready?
Ready.
Oh, Dr. Johnson, I forgot. You want to say something brief about your work right now? I think the audience will get something they will benefit greatly from that.
Yeah, so a lot of my work, even though a lot of my titles have been around special education, my interest and focus is really around bringing this idea of neurodiversity into schools and using that as a way to help us rethink special education and general education. And if you're not familiar with the concept of neurodiversity, really briefly, that really is just coming from neuroscience and acknowledging that all of our brains are different. We all learn, on a different trajectory. This whole idea of like average students or typical students or linear learning paths is not true. It's not backed by science. And it also has really led us to create some really inflexible structures for students. And so as we start to really use neurodiversity to guide our teaching, it's going to put us in a place to be just more expansive in our thinking and more flexible in the way that we set up learning environments for kids.
Man, that's big, especially when you're an equity warrior, right? Trying to make sure the babies get what they particularly need and not trying to force people in a box. So, hey, if you want to hear more about that, I'm sure she's going to be doing some other podcasts, or maybe when she accepts her award, she may drop some gems on the audience there. So make sure that you tap in. Get your tickets now to that Ingenuity Conference in March coming up. All right, y'all ready?
We're ready.
All right, topic number 1. Should non-certified parents be able to homeschool their children with IEPs? That's deep. That's deep. Who wants to jump in first?
I could start us off. So I want to start with saying I feel a lot of empathy for parents who feel like that's the only option that they have because their kids have had such negative experiences in school that they need to go the homeschooling route. But I will say if you make that choice, you need to be really committed to putting a lot of energy into making sure that you understand the like unique needs that your child has and also the specific strengths that they have and leverage those to open up learning to them. Because what I've seen happen in the past is parents don't have a really strong understanding about who their child is as a learner and get frustrated and start to shame the child for not being able to, progress in whatever time frame they think they're supposed to. And it has just really long-term detrimental effects. So if that's what you want to do, like make sure you're doing your due diligence about learning about who your kid is and how to be the best teacher for specifically your kid, not just some like general child that you're thinking about.
Yeah, I will piggyback off of that and just say that I do believe that parents should have choices and we shouldn't strip parents of choices based on certification because I'm really big on the word educators and I believe that any and all adults can be educators. We have something to offer to our youth. Like you said, Dr. Johnson, if we're going to um, take the route of supporting our babies at home, then we have to put in the work. And putting in the work means that we need to understand what are some of their assets and challenges, and being able to highlight those things that they're strong and support them in those things and help them grow. But then also do the work in providing them with the tools, structures, and resources that will allow them to successfully navigate not just through schooling but through life. And so I've seen at times where parents overcompensate their learners and their babies because of um, their shame and their I guess, frustration and also their own insecurities of what people may make or think about their babies. And so it sometimes does a disservice to kiddos, especially when later on they want to transition them back into public schooling. And there has been those significant learning losses, and it creates more social distance between children and their colleagues and their peers. So I would just say if you're going to, I don't want to strip parents of choice, but I definitely believe that you need to do the work if that's the route that you're going to choose for you and your baby.
It's interesting because I got stuck on the word certified, and for me, I'm like, yo, it's some certified people out here that should not have access to our babies, right? And so, yeah, I think a non-certified parent should have the opportunity to teach homeschool their child if they want to, and if they have the ability to. I thought about homeschooling my child who did not have an IEP at one point, but one of the things I realized is, like Dr. Allegra said, it was hard for me to work with her around things that I felt like should come easy to her because they came easy to me. And I realized that, like, the grace that I had with other people's children, it was very challenging for me to have that grace with my own child because the expectations that I had for her were almost unrealistic, right? And so, I would consider myself certified, right? But I didn't have the grace and the people skills to be able to work with my daughter in the way that I worked with other children, right? It takes a very special person to be able to have that diligence and patience with their child to work with them through issues because, like I said, for me it was, school came so easy for me that I just automatically expected that to be reciprocated in my child. And when it didn't, it's almost like I don't want to compare. I am going to do this. But I'm gonna compare myself to Jordan, right? it's like sometimes it's so easy to shoot a jumper that you just be like, I don't know how I shoot the jumper. Just you be like, just jump, and they be like, that's what I'm doing. I'm jumping, but it ain't working for me to say, because sometimes I learned that it was hard for me to explain to her how to do things that just came naturally for me, whereas with other students I could. So I think whether it's certified, non-certified, it's really about who you are as a person that makes the difference in whether you can or can't.
I would concur with the team tonight. But you know why some of the greatest players never make the best coaches, because they cannot break down how they do what they do, right? They do it, they've been coached, and it comes so natural. So when it's time to coach somebody up, it's tough, right? The only thing I would add though, and I don't know, I'm not too deep in terms of the knowledge of what goes in, but there definitely should be some sort of orientation, some type of resource before a parent does jump in, because on the flip side, not specifically student with IEP, but I have seen some parents do a phenomenal job of homeschooling their child. But at the same time, like, I think parents need to know what they're getting themselves into before jumping in. I forgot who had mentioned that, but like, you really could set your child back if you're not doing everything you're supposed to. Then you transition them back to public school or whatever. Now they're behind even further. And so I think it should just be so transparent that you understand the pros and the cons and everything you need to do to have that impact on your child.
That's time.
All right. Rapid fire discussion topic number 2, inclusion model, myth or magic? What y'all think?
I'll start off. It's not a myth, and it's magical when you put all the right pieces in place. I think it can be a mistake. We didn't put myth, magic, or mistake. It can be a mistake if you want to half do it. And what I mean by half do it, I mean there has to be the decision to put the funding behind it. There has to be a decision to have non-negotiables on how teachers are going to interact with each other, the training to support the teachers, the structures behind the scheduling, the organizing behind um, all of the different intricate details that would make it a magical experience. I have yet to see a perfect model, because we know that every school community is its own island and it has its own personality. And whenever you're doing a human service, you won't get perfection because we're imperfect people. However, I have seen some really amazing models, both in the charter school system and in the traditional public school system, that I believe are worth celebrating and worth even visiting. So I don't think it's a myth. I do think it can be a mistake, and I have seen where it's been magical.
Yeah, I'll just go on and double tap on all of what you shared. This was actually the topic of my dissertation, and what I've really come to believe in and build into the work that I'm doing is that it's not enough to just put kids with IEPs in classes and expect it all to go well. There's a whole and real deep set of like rewiring that we have to do as teachers and as educators and as leaders around our beliefs about students with disabilities and students with IEPs, and that they have a rightful place in general education and that they can be successful, and also that general education teachers can be successful teaching them. Because what I found at the end of the study that I did really was all of the general education teachers that I interviewed said that they believed in inclusion conceptually, but they didn't think that they actually had the skills to do it. And so if you're putting kids in front of them that they feel like they can't teach, they're going to ignore them. And that is just going to set up like a really negative situation for students. Like if they don't feel seen, if they don't feel accepted, if the teacher doesn't feel like they can be successful with them, then the quality of that experience for the student is going to be really poor, and that's going to block any access that they have to learning, and then just perpetuate this idea that kids with IEPs can't be successful in general education. So paired with the things that he was talking about, like, you have to make sure that you do that like mindset work to make sure that people's beliefs really match up with the actions that you're asking them to take.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And it's, in addition to the structure, right? So at my site, Elite Public Schools, we have instructional assistants. And here's what we know. The best or first direct instruction is important. And sometimes when kids aren't with the teacher, they miss that part, right? And then I'm speaking strictly secondary right now. And then it's on the teacher in their pullout to be able to be a master at every subject, right? Which is difficult, especially when you get to the secondary level. So great first instruction needs to happen, but the scholar or the student has to be in there to receive that, right? And so the way we have set up, and we need some more training with instructional assistants, but they are in the classrooms, they run small groups, they also run one-on-one, and because they're in the classroom, like nobody even realizes they're just walking around seeing who needs help, and then obviously they have their caseload. So that happens in the class as the kids are doing the work. But the instructional assistants need to be in lockstep with the teacher as well. Um, but we have seen some benefit for the kids being in the class for the actual great first instruction. The only thing I would have all schools consider is that they have intensive training for those instructional assistants, so they can provide the necessary support. And then lastly, I will just say this: by having the full inclusion model, um, you have some kids who maybe not have been tested, right? Parents haven't taken the steps, or you might have some that are just on the cusp, and they benefit from it as well, having an instructional assistant in the classroom, working in those small groups on behalf of the student with the IEP, but they're benefiting from that as well. So you kind of see the impact being had on a much broader spectrum as well for some of the other kids who may just be struggling.
IJ, do you want to tap in on this one?
No, because y'all answered it. That's the problem when you have a ed specialist online. You don't leave space for us dumb folks to be able to give an answer. You know what I'm saying? So nah, y'all had this one in the bag.
Well, we got a little extra time for the next one, and I do want to hear your perspective on number 3. I'm really excited to hear you talk about number 3.
All right, so number 3, IEP meetings, how parents and advocates should prepare.
This is a really interesting one because as you know, I've done a lot of advocate work with students and families when it comes to IEPs. I think when it comes to preparation, especially for parents, the first thing they have to do is understand that, or this is just my opinion, but I treat the IEP process almost as if it's a courtroom. And so for me, it's like we not operating in feelings, we operating in facts, right? Facts as it relates to what has occurred and what hasn't occurred to be able to support our student to be the best version of themselves in the space. Because, and the only reason why I say that is because when we show up with a lot of emotion, the meetings become unproductive. And we end up spending, 2, 3, 4 hours going in circles about some of the same things and not really getting progress in terms of like developing an action plan that's going to support the student. And the thing about that is that people get tired mentally, physically, psychologically in those meetings, and the longer they go, the more unproductive they become. I think the other piece that I always advise parents to prepare for is make sure that they are demanding that positive things are said about their child. Do not allow those meetings to become an indictment of everything that your child is doing wrong or struggling with. And so preparation can be just simply like you detailing what your child is good at and great at, and then making sure that those things are accounted for in the meeting, right? If you're not hearing in the meeting the things that you've already identified about your child, then you understand that no one is developing the type of relationship with your child that is necessary for them to really succeed in that school environment. So that's kind of where I would start with it, is with those two things.
I really love that. And I would just want to add also that, you know, parents are their children's first educator. Like, you know your child better than all of these other people with the credentials in the room. And so as you're having conversations about like the goals in particular and the accommodations that you're, you know, like that your child is going to need to be able to show up as their best self at school, like that's a part of the conversation that you should be really actively engaged in. And also, I always encourage parents to have a conversation with their kids before they step into those IEP meetings to get an understanding of like, how is the child experiencing the IEP at school? Like, how are they experiencing being in special education? So if there are pieces that you need to advocate around, or if there are insights that you need to share that no one is aware of, you come ready with that information. But I think the frustration I've always had with IEP meetings, especially from like the school staff side, is that there's a level of defensiveness when parents try to participate that I feel like is incredibly inappropriate. And also just like a minimizing of the amount of insight and information that a parent can bring that can actually really support us as an educational team in creating an IEP that's actually really going to be supportive of the student.
I'll just hop in real quick and say some of the things that have really made me disappointed is the word I'll use, is when we give a child so much power that they, and what I mean by power, oftentimes parents dismiss behaviors that they've seen at home. So when the setting is saying we identify these behaviors, it's like he or she doesn't do that. And it's like, no, you've witnessed he or she doing what we're communicating. So let's not be super advocate for things that we know is happening in the home setting and in the school setting. And then I've seen to where school setting, they're just so overwhelmed with this learner that they want to do whatever it takes to get them off the campus or out of their classroom. So now there are these um, exaggerated behaviors that, maybe it's happened one time, but it's like every time, all the time, every day, repeatedly. And I think that um, when I say this child then holding power, it's like what I communicate to my mom believes that. Um, Allowing the parent and the school to have this animosity, I just really feel like as adults, we have to do a better job of deciding to be partners. Like, how can we all be partners? And how can we say, like, let's come together and understand what we can do at the home setting, at the school setting that supports the learner and that is consistent. And oftentimes there is um, this rage before we even say good morning. Like, we already have a negative disposition about the other party before we even say, "Hi, my name is." And I don't think that I've been on both sides of being an advocate and also being in the as an administrator, and it's just been really sad to see that a group of adults can't come together in unity and 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 community to really support learners. And I'm really talking about at the secondary level, not with our elementary babies. I'm talking about with our 10th grade or 11th grade babies who sometimes control the narrative on how their parents perceive the school community. And it gets real rough in some of those conversations and discussions.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. I think you know, preparing by, being sweet with your approach, right? I always tell my older students, you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar, right? So that would be my advice to parents as well, just being prepared. And you can do a lot of that by just asking questions, right? Even if you already know the answer, I'll ask a question and I know the answer just so I can make the other person verbalize that, kind of disarm them. But also as a parent, you can't just accept what they're saying, because they might write this whole plan. And I think Dr. Johnson had a great point, like, what your baby needs. But there needs to be a certain level of professionalism that, like, they'll be more accomplished. And it's tough, it's your baby, and you're emotional about what's going on. But also I would just put out there, like, modeling for your student or your scholar as well. Because at the secondary level, especially, I feel like power in a different way, Keith, where the students actually should be the ones kind of facilitating the meeting, right? And teaching, so they're learning how to be advocates for themselves, whether that's giving them a script when they're early on, maybe in middle school, where they're reading a script and kind of leading that meeting to the point where when they're in high school, they know how to lead their own meeting. I think this is something empowering about that, so they can advocate through high school and beyond, right? They're not a stranger for, going to get what they need to be successful. So yeah, so I think, like, just a different approach, a different mentality going in the meeting is how I would prepare. Ask plenty of questions, because I've seen, like I said, I've seen IEPs teams like, okay, we need this, and that, and other. Parents just like, okay, so ask questions, and then being a model for your scholar, right? So they can be an advocate for themselves.
That's time.
All right. Rapid fire discussion topic number 4. Why are disproportionate referrals still happening in 2023 and 24? On your marks, get set, go.
Racism.
That was
Oh, we
my
just gonna
answer
call it
too.
out. Okay, we just gonna call it out. Okay. I have our keynote speaker last year at the Equity Ingenuity Conference was Dr. Bettina Love. Shout out to her. Boop, boop. And she dropped her new book, if you haven't picked it up, Punished for Dreaming. And so I'm reading that text because I'm going to be leading a book study here in Houston in a couple of weeks. And one of the things she said, that it's not that I haven't thought about it, but she gave language to it and was able to articulate this idea of, like, so you thought there wasn't going to be any retaliation after the Brown versus Board of Education? Like, we really thought everyone was going to be kumbaya, and she really gave evidence as to the state of Virginia shut down public education for 5 years after Brown versus Board. Like, nobody getting an education if we got to integrate kids. And so they're the only way to retaliate is to create policies and systemic barriers that would create pipelines for marginalized group of learners, particularly Black children, children of color, so that they wouldn't have access to best education. They decided to privatize education to get their learners out of public because they just were not supportive of the Brown versus Board. And so when we think about that, we're celebrating 50 years of it in 2024. And we're still seeing some of the retaliation from a decision that was made 50 years ago. So I would support what IJ says is racism.
It's racism and unacknowledged implicit bias. I mean, special education is inherently a deficit-based system, and the entire purpose around special education is to sort and to categorize kids. And even if you look at the eligibility categories where the majority of students end up getting eligible for special education, it's specific learning disability and other health impairment, both of which are incredibly subjective measures that really only exist within education. And the tools that we use to assess kids to give them that eligibility category, like, those all came out of eugenics. The entire purpose really is just to label and sort kids, and the entire infrastructure of it is just incredibly racist. It's always been predominantly students of color who end up being qualified for special education. So there's really, like, if you just have to pay attention to see it, it's not a secret. There's nothing, like, hidden about it.
Agree, and agree. I will say this too. Just thinking about it from a different lens. Um, sometimes it's black and brown educators perpetuating because they were able to navigate those waters and go to college and do their thing. And then because it's kind of like what IJ said, because he was able to do it, everybody else should be able to do it, not even realizing, the amount of people that are oppressed because of the system. And so just not being, self-aware enough to understand like, you were the exception and not the rule. You were able to get through it, and that's just that's not the case in large. Um, and so just there needs to be a lot of work around changing perspective and lens. That's one thing that I always say. Just because you did it doesn't mean that the system is not. Well, IJ says the system is working perfectly. That's what it was designed to do. Um, and so I agree 100%. And again, and educators still, I mean, still not taking their, no desire to really get to know their kids. Um, which, for us that have that perspective makes it working with our babies easy, right? Because I'm from that, right? So everything that a child might be doing, I already got the game for that, right? So I'm gonna hold you back. I'm gonna spit some knowledge to you, and I'm gonna work with you. You know what I'm saying? Um, and lastly, I would just say, I heard this from IJ at one of his talks when we first started doing these webinars in terms of dehumanizing. Every time we kick a kid out, we're dehumanizing. It was really deep to listen to him speak on it, and to the point where they don't want to be a part of the school system because they're always being kicked out, right? And then he ended it by saying like, well, they're going to find somewhere that loves them, right? Loves them. And so the streets are just waiting with his arms open for a place that they're being affirmed, right? And that really is the issue. And instead of taking the time to really get to know the students and see what they need, it's just easier for some folks to just put them out, like, you know what I mean? Just kick them out of class. And then you don't think you have to deal with it. But we all know, you think about some of the students that they gave you the most challenge. Okay, years over, they move on. But guess what? You're gonna have another student with similar challenges the next year. So instead of changing yourself, you're just focused on getting those kids out.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback on that. Beyond racism, the other culprit here is capitalism. And that's because capitalism is designed that to create disparities among people, right? It's designed to create haves and have nots. And so one of the quickest ways that you have those who profit and those who don't is through the educational system establishing right then and there, right from kindergarten on up, that like some of you will be rich and some of you will be poor, or some of you will be academically successful and some of you will be academically failures, right? And when you create that and then you mimic academic success or lack thereof with economic success or lack thereof, right? You see that like the system is not designed for everybody to be successful. Like everybody can't get an A in this class because everybody will think they could be a doctor or a lawyer. And if everybody becomes a doctor or a lawyer, then somebody ain't working at McDonald's. And we have to create in our schools disparities so that some people feel like the best they can do is McDonald's and they're content with working at McDonald's. Because if you think the best you can do is working at Kaiser, but now you got to work at McDonald's because there's more people who can work at Kaiser than McDonald's, that's when revolutions happen. And so in order to minimize the possibility of revolution, you inherently create a system that psychologically brainwashes children into thinking that they either can achieve or can't achieve. It's like an elephant, right? When I used to work at Marine World, which is our Discovery theme park in Vallejo, They used to tell us that when the elephant is a baby, they put a chain on it so that it feel like it can't go anywhere. When it's a baby, it can't break the chain, but when it's an adult, it has the power to break the chain. But psychologically, because it couldn't break the chain as a baby, it feels like it can't break the chain as an adult. And so that same baby chain that chained that elephant when it was small is what chain. And so it's the same thing. When they handicap you in elementary, in kindergarten, and tell you that you're not smart and you're not capable and that you're dumb, and they don't recognize the neurodiversity that you're bringing into the educational space. When you become an adult, you are still chained by that chain that you have the power to break, but you will still walk around feeling like you can't. And that's why I say, like, they disguise it as racism, but really it's capitalism, because they don't want everybody to feel like that they can have the best life possible, right? And so it's how they profit off of us. If you feel like you cannot, then I can actually profit off of that, because now I can hire you for, I mean, I can go on and on, but like it's systematic is what I'm really trying to say at the end of the day, that like these disparities aren't going anywhere because they're baked into the system. And until you demolish the system, they'll continue to be baked in. Individual folks like us, there's only so much power or so much that we can do in the face of systems that are designed to continue to create these disparities.
It's really interesting. I know time is up on this one, but it's really interesting as you talk about it being a capitalistic challenge, and I don't disagree with that. It just made me think about in other countries. I know, like in the Philippines, they don't have a middle class system. It's pretty much poor or wealthy. But education isn't a tool to say that a poor man isn't smart, or a poor man isn't capable of having his own business, or a poor man doesn't have the skill set to have a successful life, even though he may not ever attain wealth. And so it's really interesting that our system, because we have this middle class system, we put a lot of emphasis on education as the tool or as the measuring stick to distinguish those who are within those different classes and those different groups.
Absolutely. We ready for the fifth and final rapid fire discussion topic? All right. Wrote a song about it. Like to hear, here it go. All right. Post high school experience for students with IEPs.
I could start us off. I think this question really feeds in well to what we were just talking about with the last question. I mean, if you look at the data around post-secondary experiences for students who had IEPs when they were in school, you know, it's like underemployed, incarcerated, high rates of incarceration, high rates of homelessness. And so when IJ was talking about, you know, this like kind of psychological brainwashing that can happen as students are going through IEPs and how they internalize, or through special education, how they internalize this idea of being inferior. Because really, I mean, like, I feel like the way that special education is structured, that's how we think about it, right? Like if a student is in special education, then they are inherently inferior to a student who is in general education, and you just carry that sense of inferiority all the way through school, that once you become an adult, I mean, that impacts your entire self-image. And so one of the things that I really want to work towards is a reality in which we can leverage the special education system for kids to really to really cultivate like a strong sense of awareness of who they are as an individual, and have that be affirming and have that not be deficit based, but also equip them with the language of being able to go out into the world and say what they need and get access to what they need, but not from a place of shame or not from a place of feeling like they're less than. And that structurally, I think, is a way that we can start to move away from all of these really negative outcomes that special education perpetuates.
And I'll speak to this question. I wrote this question with the thought of a student who we serviced and who graduated from high school and came back, and we used to have our alumni come and speak to teachers on the first week of school to kind of say, like, this is what worked and this is what did not work. And so this particular school was a multi-site charter school network, and one of the learners came back and told us, like, you over coddled me with the special education resources, because I didn't go straight into college. I went into the real world as a worker and going to trade school. And some of those services and those additional supports were not accessible for me. And so I didn't know how to navigate the world because I didn't have a strong sense of self advocacy and a strong sense of communicative skills to support me to get the things that I need in order to be a successful person. And so I was really thinking about, why is it that the school system, we recognize that there are neurodiverse learners, and we attempt to provide supports to create equitable learning experiences. But when they get on the job site or when they get in college, those supports are not always differentiated for their ongoing experiences in life as adults. Like, for example, even in the like when they're pulled over by police officers, should police officers be aware of some of the um, disabilities that people have so that they can interact with them differently than they would someone who does not have disabilities? Why aren't they utilizing some of the same supports that we do in education to interact with some people? So that would just be an example as my thoughts were thinking in writing this question.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because the first thing that I thought of myself is like, you know, you know, my grandfather was, I think, 10 years older than my grandmother. And so he was 29, she was like 18 when they got married. And that gap seems big until he was like 80, 89 and she was 80, and they just both was old. You know what I mean? And you just like, it's like the older you get, the less significant that gap is. I be feeling that way about some of our students who do have IEPs in schools. Like, I feel like the older they get, the better they become at learning how to navigate the world. And so, like, it's many times that I have had friends and colleagues that was completely unaware that they needed those supports, because they has gotten so good at figuring out what they needed to be successful and how to navigate the world in a way that you would be like, yo, like, I would have never even guessed that you had uh uh a learning difference, right? And so I think, you know, yeah, there's that piece of, you know, some of them are not able to overcome, but I think, man, I think far more of our students show a resilience outside of school, post education, that if we gave them more opportunities in school to show that resilience, we could really see just how dope they are, right? Because they they're having families, they're getting married, they're buying homes. They're like, when you get out into the quote unquote real world, those accommodations, like you said, aren't there. And I'm finding that some of them are really, really excelling as they get further and further away from childhood, and begin to develop better and better the systems that they need to be successful as adults.
100, man, 100. Our director of special ed, Dr. Steph Sanders, when he first came aboard with us, we were having a conversation, and you know, his goal, it was to uh do what was necessary to the point where the student didn't need the IEP as much, right? He said the IEP should not be a life sentence. Um, and so that really makes me think that as a school system, we are not, and there's a myriad of reasons, but we are not doing a great job of creating goals for the students to attain so they can progress to the point where you know, it is not a life sentence. By the time they're close to being seniors, the supports are needed much less than in the beginning, say when they were in elementary. And we don't do a great job of scaffolding that, and then the kids get passed through, they fall further and further behind because the goals weren't effective. Um, and that's why it goes back to my earlier point. Like, I really think that we should train the students as they get older to be able to facilitate their own meetings so they can express actually what they need. I mean, how many of us been in the IEP meeting where the kids just kind of sat there like, listen to it was almost like they weren't even in the room, right? The adults are having this conversation about them, but they could have been just a fly on the wall, you know what I mean? And not really incorporating them into their own meeting. Like that, to me, that just doesn't make any sense. So we have to do a better job of and be a little more intentional so they don't have to have all of those supports. And like Keith said, by the time they get to high school, they're relying less on it. And obviously, there are going to be situations where the supports are going to be necessary to determine. I mean, depending on that situation. But they should have those opportunities, in my opinion, so they can be prepared to be their own advocates in that real world. And IJ, that was heavy, man. You're absolutely right, because that gap does narrow, and no one's walking around like, hey, what does your IEP say? At age 37, or whatever the case may be, right? We're all humans, and we're all, trying to do the best we can, make a living, taking care of our family. Yeah, they just, I mean, the students just need an opportunity to do that, you know. Yeah, and a lot have gone on to have, wonderful lives, So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth.
And that's time. We did good.
And
Hey,
we getting better.
we getting better.
All right, Dr. Johnson, that's the end of the rapid fire discussion topics. At this juncture, I mean, do you have anything to say to all of the viewers out here? Any parting words?
Well, first thing, can't wait to see you in Houston at the conference. Can't wait to see you. And if you would like to connect with me, we can connect on LinkedIn, or you can email me at drallegrajohnson@gmail.com. And I really am just on a mission to be really supportive to schools and districts and helping them really, go through that mindset shift that they need to go through so that they can then do all of the tactical things that they need to do to make our special education programs truly inclusive and make our general education classrooms a place where really all learners can be acknowledged and thrive and supported and wanted. And so if you are interested in doing any of that kind of work, just go ahead and reach out to me and we can talk about partnering.
That's dope. That's dope. Well, on behalf of Menti Educational Services, we just want to thank you for taking time out of your evening. I know we're all busy, but this means a lot to us to be a part of this latest episode of our System Disruptor podcast, Crucial Conversations for Radical Educators. And, as Dr. Johnson just mentioned, make sure that you go to our website, tap in, buy your tickets now. You know what I mean? The early bird catches the worm. For this Ingenuity conference that we're having in Houston, Texas, at the beautiful campus of the University of Houston. Key, hit us with the date.
March 22nd through 23rd, Houston, Texas. It's going down. Super duper excited. And Dr. Johnson is one of our Spotlight awardees. And I'm so excited to hear the gems she's going to drop as she accepts her award.
Well, those listening understand why she's one of the Spotlight Award winners. Phenomenal work, and we appreciate everything that you do for our babies. You dig?
An honor and a blessing every single day.
All right. With that being said, Key, I think it's time, huh? Go ahead and put a fork in this episode. It's done. All right, y'all. Until the next time, y'all be smooth out there. And don't procrastinate on this conference. Y'all just go ahead and do it, because we got a lot of feedback after the last one. People were super, oh, I'll be at the next one. You don't want to have that mindset, right? Go ahead and tap in. Don't tap out. With that being said, man, y'all be smooth, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Happy holidays, everyone.